Namaste and welcome to Naaree Talk, the show that gives you everything you need to overcome your limitations and live your best life. Hi, I'm talking to Erica Scott. She's a consent educator based in Nelson, British Columbia, Canada. Her passion is working to create a more consensual, more compassionate world. She developed the fun, interactive workshop, Consent Culture Intro, which will be published in a book form in 2020. Last month, she trained several Delhi facilitators to lead the Consent Culture Intro workshop, and she plans to return to India next year to train more facilitators in more cities. Hi, Erica.
Hi,
Yeah,
namaste.
namaste. It's lovely to connect with you after meeting you at the Karmavir, workshop. Not the workshop, the Karmavir event, Karmavir Award event. And I was really amazed to hear your story, and I was amazed at your courage and the fact that you have chosen to take your life experience and turn it into something positive, and give back and teach people about how to have healthier relationships and so, can you tell us a little bit about how you started out and why we need consent, why we need to understand the concept of consent?
Yes, thank you. So I was sexually abused as a child, and it really shattered my boundaries. And it took me quite a while to learn how to have healthy boundaries, healthier. I like to say healthier boundaries because I don't think any of us has 100% healthy boundaries, and something we're always learning.
Yeah.
And there are always new challenges. So I've had many life experiences that have helped me to survive what I went through and get to the point of being able to thrive and wake me up to the fact that I have more to offer, and that this is something that is needed by a lot of people. I would say pretty much everybody. So after going through a health crisis several years ago, I really felt knocked down. Literally, I couldn't get out of bed for months, and I just was like, I have to recreate myself again. It's so exhausting. But then I learned it was a great lesson in learning to love myself and to see that, okay, what you're doing is not your life's purpose. It's not what you need to do something with more meaning. And so that's what brought me to learning how to teach consent culture. And I love it. So, and I feel like it's really needed. A lot of people don't understand until they do it how much it can help them. So that's what I'm doing right now, is trying to get it into the schools and places where people will, it's kind of ironic, but I want to force people to take consent culture training. So,
It has to be consensual.
yeah.
The consent culture training. I like that. So what I wanted to ask you, Erica, how would you define consent, and why is it important to learn about consent?
So consent has been defined several different ways. For a long time, people just said no means no, and that's great. And then it became you have to get a verbal yes, and then it became anything but an enthusiastic yes is a no, and that's really great for a lot of reasons. So what I'm teaching in my workshops is, let's take it another step and say, how can we collaborate? How can we play together nicely? Because consent, people think, oh, that's one person asks for something and the other person says yes or no, but it's really never that simple. Hopefully more than one person is asking for what they want, and then that makes it a kind of collaboration. So I define consent culture as what happens when you have two or more people who are collaborating to have the most mutually agreeable interactions possible.
That's a nice, empowering way to look at it. I like that. So, I mean, is consent only for sexual relationships, or does it go beyond that in terms of looking at relationships on the whole, you know?
No, it goes way beyond that. And that's part of the problem, is that we learn from the time we're very little, we're being taught uh, unconsciously and consciously that we don't have total physical autonomy, that if we say no, it can be, we can be yelled at, we can be told we're bad.
Yeah.
And and also a lot of bullying behaviors and unfortunate status stuff that follows us for our whole lives, and then translates into sexual miscommunication when we get older. And we're socialized differently, depending on our gender, depending on our culture. We all have different communication styles. It's a wonder that we ever come together and get anything done at all.
Yeah, but you know, the fact that the human race is thriving shows that we do, I guess.
Right? We try somehow, but we can get better. You know, we live in a world now where it's really normalized that we have sexual assault and that we have bullying, and I think we can turn that around. But we have a lot of things to unlearn. And so you're asking about sexuality. It's not just about sexuality. It really goes deep. It really goes to the core of who we are, and if we are all equal or not, and if we're all treated that way, you know. And,
yes.
So also some people think, okay, consent is about legality. It's about, you know, if you do this, then it's illegal. Well, yeah, of course we want to steer away from illegal activities, but it's much more than that. It's more like, how can we be better human beings to each other? We don't have to, we can do better than, you know, the legal limit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Legal limits are just, I mean, they're just basic guidelines. I mean, and why do you have to go to legalities when it comes to relationships? In relationships, you should have your own understanding of what, you know, what the other person wants, and that should be completely mutual. Like you said, it has to go beyond. It has to be a collaboration, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to unlearn.
Yes.
So that's a big part of the workshop, is exercises that help us really look at, oh, this is what I do. Oh, why do I do that? You know, most people have a much harder time saying no than they even realize. Most people struggle with saying no, and most of us struggle with hearing no graciously.
Yes.
So these are things we can practice and get better at. And yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And in India, we have a huge problem when it comes to consent, right? We absolutely don't understand that, because it's never taught. Consent is never taught. It's never even brought up. Like, you know, from the time we're little children, we are not taught that we have body autonomy, that we have control over, you know, that we can say yes or no to not hugging someone, or not being, you know, physically affectionate with someone that we don't want to be, right? I mean, that's why there's so much sexual assault in childhoods from people that we know, uncles, you know, family members, because young children are never taught that they can say no to a certain interaction.
You know, one of the things I loved about being in India is that people, to me, the people in India are not in denial about the problem. Like, I know there's a feeling that the problem is much worse in India. But when you look at the statistics of how many people are assaulted, how many people report being assaulted, how many reported assaults go to trial, they're really close. It's not that different. And I really think all those problems you just talked about, it's true everywhere. It's definitely true here in North America as well. It might be better in some places, like in some Scandinavian countries. But I think pretty much all over the world we have these issues, and I think it just, in some places people are more in denial.
That's true.
And I actually found that kind of refreshing in India, that people were like, yeah, we know this is a problem and we want to do something about it. Whereas behind here, there's a lot more of like, what are you talking about? Why would consent education? There's no problem, so yeah, but all those things you talked about, it's all happening here too. The statistics are very, it's it can be overwhelming.
What do you
problem is everywhere.
Yeah, what do you think is at the root of the problem, Erica? What have you found that the kind of attitudes and the kind of conditioning that's at the root of the problem?
Right. I really think it does come down to how we're conditioned as children. So if you look at, it's not a totally gendered thing. At first I thought, okay, this is something women have a hard time saying no and men have a hard time hearing it. But after for a while, I'm realizing it's really a human condition, and there is a gendered aspect to it. There is, but in general, people have a hard time saying no. In general, people have a hard time hearing no.
Yeah.
But when you look at how girls and boys are socialized, they did an experiment with some kids in London several years ago, and they were 6-year-old kids. They separated them up into girls and boys. And they had a nice lady come and make them lemonade. Okay. But she put salt in the lemonade. And when she poured everybody their lemonade, the boys were like spitting it out right away, like, this is terrible. I'm not drinking this. And the girls were all like, thank you. It's not my favorite, but yum, yum. So, and this is at 6 years old already. This is where we're at. And I mean, just think about how that extrapolates when you have one gender that's taught to be assertive, go for what they want, that their status depends on getting what they want. And then you have another gender that's socialized to be nice, avoid confrontation. Their status depends on being liked and being included. I mean, it's no wonder how that extrapolates to when we then become sexual with each other. It's amazing to me that we ever figure it out at all.
Yeah, that's right.
So people talk about toxic masculinity, but we also need to be talking about toxic femininity, which to me is what I just described, this eagerness to please others above your own well-being.
Yes. Yes.
And that can be a problem for all people. It doesn't have to be a woman's, it doesn't have to be a woman. There are lots of men who have people pleasing and trouble saying no problems.
Yeah.
But this is part of the problem, and it would work fine if humanity was made up entirely of people who all operated this way. But unfortunately, there are predators, and there are, because of the different socializations, you end up with these dynamics where one person is going for what they want and the other person is having a really hard time expressing their needs, expressing their boundaries. So what we teach in the workshop is both practicing knowing what your boundaries are and expressing them, but also practicing hearing other people's boundaries, hearing their attempts to express their boundaries, and how to make it easier for people around you to express their boundaries.
Right. And be
which
honest.
Is something that,
which
is something that men appreciate from the workshop, is having a way to make it easier for people around them to express their boundaries and take the awkwardness out of hearing no. So,
Right. I mean, do you think of course there are different kinds of people at different levels of evolution, right? And I don't know how many of them would be open to hearing that message. Of course, there are men who believe that it's their God-given right to, take what they want. We see that in America, because with the president himself being, kind of a predator, I would say.
Yes.
To put it, I'm not going to be diplomatic about that. So that kind of consent, do you see that that's a dangerous precedent, right? We're setting a dangerous precedent for accepting men in power, or women in power for that matter, anyone in power having
Yeah,
control over others, and being able to impose themselves on others. So what can we do about that? How can we change that kind of, what do you see we can, what do you think we can do about that?
that's right. Yeah, unfortunately, bullying and entitlement are being glorified, and I'm just hoping that this, rise in fascism, basically, that we're seeing all over the world is
Yes.
an ending. I'm hoping that it's a last gasp. Not to think that we'll
Fingers
suddenly be in
crossed.
utopia and nothing bad will ever happen again, but
No, yeah.
I am hoping that we're on the verge of a breakthrough. And what I see with people on a day-to-day level and in interpersonal interactions, that there is an evolution happening. There is compassion happening, and but I am wanting to get this to, although of course it's open to any age. I am really wanting to get this to younger people.
Yes, because that's where the change happens, I think, right? That's where we can make a change in mindset and conditioning, because that's where it starts, right?
And my workshop is actually fun. It's really fun to do. There's a lot of laughter.
Mm-hmm.
People have fun with it. And I think we learn better when we're doing things and when we're laughing. So it's a lot of exercises and interaction and discussion. And a lot of times I hear things like, oh, like, I can't believe I haven't had this conversation before. And oh, it's so simple once you do it, but I didn't think of it before. And so I really think if we can get this to young people, we can, yeah, make it a change faster. So
I'm going to attend your workshop the next time you're in India. So so let me know
oh,
about that. WhatsApp me, because I'm really what do you say? I'm really excited about seeing how that works.
unfortunately, I don't have fixed dates yet for when I'm
Mm,
coming back to India.
yeah,
I hope it will be within the year. But I also did train several people in India to give the workshops.
yeah.
So they will be happening. And I know that some of them are intending to get started in January.
Okay.
So we can get people hooked up to that. But right now, my focus is on getting it happening here in Canada to a larger extent.
Yeah.
And there's a book coming out this year. I need to get an online course happening.
Oh,
So yeah,
wow. The online course
yeah,
will be very exciting. Yes, so
yeah.
that's
That's my very next.
mhm.
That's my very next project
Yeah,
here
right, right.
in January. So, um, and so I will be focusing on really getting boots on the ground here in North America this spring and summer, and then hopefully I'll be able to come back and tour uh, later in the year, later in 2020.
In India. Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. I'd love to catch up again with you after our meeting in Delhi. That's really good. I mean, I was so amazed hearing your story and everything. So, Erica, another thing I want to ask you is, I think see another place that we have, that I think consent education is very important is in the corporate world, because we hear of the Me Too movement and so much stuff that is all completely about consent, right? That's all completely about lack of consent and a miscommunication and cross messages. So I see, I in my personal experience also, I've had experiences as a woman, as I'm sure any woman has had, where men misunderstand you for being friendly and for being, open and compassionate, and they take that as an invitation, to
Yeah.
hit on you. So, how do we prevent this as women? How do we prevent getting our messages crossed? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Oh, that's a tough one. Yes, I experienced that while I was in India as well. There were a couple of times where I was just my normal friendly self, and it was clearly taken as some kind of invitation.
Mm,
That happens here as well.
yeah.
Um, See, this is a thing that I don't think it can be just women that prevent this. That's why I would really like to get the training to everyone.
Yeah.
Um, but when you do practice saying no and expressing your boundaries, it does help to when you come into those situations where you understand that you're expressing a boundary and the other person is not hearing it or seeing it, and be able to communicate about that more clearly and earlier before it can become more of a problem. That's really all you can do is express to people, you know, I didn't ask for that. This isn't what I want. You know, I need to be asked before you do things like that. One of the things I do in my workshop is do demonstrations of how to deal with that. When, you know, you've done the workshop and now you understand what the rules of consent are, but you're going out into a world where most people don't. How do you deal with that when they cross your boundaries? And of course, it depends on how serious it is and how dangerous it is. Sometimes it's not safe to say, no, you've crossed my boundary. Sometimes you have to go along with what's happening in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So to know what different situations are. And that brings up part of what happens in work scenarios. Often there's a power imbalance. Usually there's a power imbalance. Bullies do not pick on people who are of the same or higher status than them.
Yes,
it just doesn't
true.
happen.
Yes, that's true.
They pick on more vulnerable people who have less power in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're often in a very complicated situation where you might feel like your job is on the line. You might feel like your ability to have a future in that corporation or in that career is on the line, and that you need to not anger the other person. Most of us want our bosses to like us. So, I mean, in that case, it really it really is the responsibility of the person with more power in the situation to make sure that there is consent, and that if they have a lot more power than the other person, they shouldn't be asking. They shouldn't be asking for touch or suggesting that they would like touch. It shouldn't be happening at all, and that they need training to realize that. And it's a really tough situation if you find yourself in that position.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to do what they need to do to survive and get through, and no judgment. Every situation is very different.
That's true. Do you believe that all these, we have all these posh educators for prevention of sexual harassment educators in India now? That's becoming quite a big thing, right? As a part of soft skills training, and in corporates, it's become very, very important to have a posh educator come in and train people. So do you think this consent education needs to be part of that?
I would love that. And I did,
Yeah.
a couple of the people that I trained also do POSH training.
Yeah.
So love to connect with POSH more as well. And I definitely think that I can add another element to their training.
Yes.
A lot of times in corporate training, in civil, so I don't know about in India, but here civil servants get training usually once a year. And also in the military, they get training. A lot of times it's just a movie. They show a movie, and there are a lot of great movies out there about preventing sexual harassment. But unfortunately, just sitting and watching a movie isn't enough. And people get up the movie and they make jokes about what they saw, and they carry on. So that's why in my workshop, we do interactive exercises and we have discussions. It just has a way more of a lasting impact. It's much more effective.
Absolutely. I think a bit of role play also, and bringing in situations where you might face this, or something that someone has already experienced, talking about past experiences. I think that would really help, get the message through, right?
Right.
Some kind of experiential learning, because just watching a movie doesn't really change mindsets enough to change behavior.
No.
Yeah.
No, a lot of times people don't take it seriously. And they've done studies. I don't have the exact statistics, but experiential learning is much more effective.
Much more effective, yes, absolutely. When you do stuff and when you see other people's reactions to your behavior, I think that makes a whole lot of difference, right? To changing behavior and to changing the way you are going to look at situations in the future. And
And
yeah.
Other people's reactions, and also too, I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, that was my reaction. Oh, that surprises me that was my reaction."
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I think this consent education needs to become an essential training for leaders, especially
Yes.
leaders in any organization. Because
Mhm.
if the leader is, like we see it happening in America today, if the leader is corrupted, if the leader
That's
is
it.
is boasting about, his, what do you say, locker room talk and stuff like that, and that becomes that becomes acceptable, then whatever work you're doing is for naught, because everyone else follows the leader, and then they're going to say, okay, if it's okay that he's doing it, of course, I mean, it's okay that I can do it. And that's becoming a trend. It's becoming a very unfortunate trend that we're seeing, so I think every leader, before they get into a leadership position or as they're growing up the ladder, should get consent education as part of their training, for leadership. That should become mandatory, I think, absolutely, because that's
I
where
agree.
abuse of power happens in leadership situations.
Mhm.
So many leaders have been fired from their organizations because of because of the Me Too movement,
Mhm.
which is,
Mhm.
so I think that is another place that you could start, your workshops.
I agree with what you're saying totally. I'm going to go a little off topic and say I think that we all need to understand a little more the psychology of leadership and people who are attracted to leadership as well. Um, Unfortunately, there is a certain portion of the population that has like varying degrees of psychopathy,
Yes.
and and they are really attracted to power. They're powerful positions, and they're often very charismatic,
Hmm.
very good at manipulating people.
Yes,
We
yes.
all need to become more aware of how this works and figure out what to do about it.
Yeah.
Um, I ideally would love to see leadership in the future be a matter of collaboration again, like teamwork,
Hmm.
rather than there be this kind of cult of
Hierarchy.
personality,
Yeah,
one
yeah.
leader kind of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the hierarchy. Yeah. So maybe flatter organizations where people are, not so much, what do you say, worshipped for their
Right.
leadership. Yeah, right.
And where individuals don't have so much power, because I really do think too that when an individual is given a lot of power, it takes so much uh, in, internal strength to resist being corrupted. I really
True.
think
That's true. Like they
that's
say, power,
would be a
power
two-border.
corrupts, power corrupts,
Yes.
and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
so, so yes, I'm sure that the draw, it's like the, I'm a Star Wars fan, so it's like the draw of the dark side, you know,
Right. Right. Exactly.
given to the dark side.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I love this discussion we're having. I think we are a bit out of time, but
Yeah.
I can probably go on talking with you for hours, Erica, but I think no, we'll wrap it up right now, because I mean, I have a time limit on my recording also. So
Yes.
but I would love to do your workshop, and I would love to recommend it to other people as well, and I would love to see it becoming part of mandatory training in corporates, and at the school level. I think it's absolutely essential that we need this kind of education today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Priya. I really
Thank you,
appreciate this.
Erica. Thank you.
Thank
And keep in touch and connect with me when you get back to India.
Thank you for listening to Naaree Talk. Visit Naaree.com and download my empowering guided meditation and work from home checklist so you can get started on your journey to emotional and financial independence. That's NAAREE.com.